The Strategist. Mrs. Jallett's young people's parties were severely exclusive. It came cheaper that way because you could ask fewer to come. "There'll be about 10 girls," speculated Rollo as he drove to the function. "And I suppose 4 fellows, unless the Wrothsleys bring their cousin, which heaven forbid. That would mean Jack and me against 3 of them." Rollo and the Wrothley brethren had maintained an undying feud almost from nursery days. They only met now and then in the holidays, and the meeting was usually tragic for whoever happened to have the fewest backers on hand. Rollo was counting tonight on the presence of a devoted and muscular partisan to hold an even balance. As he arrived, he heard his prospective champion's sister apologizing to the hostess for the unavoidable absence of her brother. A moment later, he noted that the Wrothsleys had brought their cousin. 2 against 3 would have been exciting and possibly unpleasant. 1 against 3 promised to be about as amusing as a visit to the dentist. Rollo ordered his carriage for as early as was decently possible and faced the company with the smile that he imagined the better sort of aristocrat would have worn when mounting to the guillotine. "Now, you children would like to play games, I suppose," said Mrs. Jallett. The young guests were too well bred to contradict her. But what were they to play? "I know of a good game," said the elder Wrotsley. "The boys leave the room and think of a word. Then they come back again, and the girls have to find out what the word is." Rollo knew the game. He would have suggested it himself if his faction had been in the majority. "It doesn't promise to be very exciting," said the superior dolorous Sneep as the boys filed out of the room. The word choosers locked themselves in the library to ensure that their deliberations were not interrupted or overheard. Then they went back to the waiting girls. "The word's camel," announced the Wrotsley cousin. "You stupid!" screamed the girls. "We've got to guess the word. Now you'll have to go back and think of another." "Not for worlds. I mean, the word isn't really camel. We were bluffing," said Rollo. "Pretend it's dromedary," he whispered to the boys. "I heard them say dromedary. I heard them. I don't care what you say. I heard them," squealed the odious Dolorous. "With ears as long as hers, one would hear anything," thought Rollo savagely. "We'll have to go back, I suppose," said the elder Wrotsley. The boys locked themselves once more in the library and debated the choice of the necessary word. Mustang was no good, as half the girls wouldn't know what it meant. Finally, Quagga was pitched on. "You must come and sit down over here," chorused the girls on their return. But Rollo was adamant that the questioned person always stood up. On the whole, it was a relief when the game was ended and supper was announced. Mrs. Jallett did not stint her young guests, but she never put extra goodies on her supper table. It was usually good policy to take whatever you wanted while it was still there. On this occasion, she had provided 16 peaches to go around 14 children. It was really not her fault that the 2 Wrothsleys and their cousin had each quietly pocketed an extra peach. But it was annoying for Dolorous and the fat, good-natured Agnes Blake to be left with 1 peach between them. "I suppose we had better halve it," said Dolorous sourly. But Agnes was fat first and good-natured afterwards. Those were her guiding principles in life. She was profuse in her sympathy for Dolores. She hastily devoured the peach, explaining that the juice would go waste if it was cut. After refreshments, Mrs. Jallet said, "Now what shall we do? The professional conjurer whom I had engaged has failed me at the last moment. Can any of you recite?" Everyone panicked. Dolores was known to recite Locksley Hall on the least encouragement. There had been occasions when her opening line, "Comrades, leave me here a little," had been taken literally by a large section of her hearers. There was a murmur of relief when Rollo declared that he could do a few conjuring tricks. He had never done one in his life, but those 2 visits to the library had prompted him to be reckless. "You have seen conjuring chaps take coins and cards out of people," he announced. "Well, I'm going to take more interesting things out of some of you. Mice, for instance." "Not mice!" as a shrill protest rose, as he had foreseen from the majority of his audience. "Well, fruit then." The suggestion was approved. Agnes positively beamed. Without more ado, Rollo made straight for his trio of enemies, plunged his hand into their jacket pockets, and produced 3 peaches. There was no applause. But no amount of hand clapping would have given the performer as much pleasure as the silence which greeted his trick. "Of course, we were in the know," said the Rossley cousin lamely. "That's done it," chuckled Rollo to himself. "If they had been Confederates, they would have sworn they knew nothing about it," said Dolores. "Do you know any more tricks?" asked Mrs. Jallet hurriedly. Rollo did not. He hinted that he might have changed the 3 peaches into something else, but Agnes had already converted one into girl food, so nothing more could be done with them. "I know a game," said the younger Wrottesley proudly, "where the fellows go out of the room and think of some character in history. Then they come back and act him, and the girls have to guess who it's meant for." "I'm afraid I'll have to leave now," said Rollo to his hostess. "Your carriage won't be here for another 20 minutes," said Mrs. Jallet. "It's such a fine evening. I think I'll walk and meet it." "It's raining rather steadily just now. You've time to play that historical game." "We haven't heard Dolores recite," said Rollo desperately. As soon as he had said it, he realized his mistake. Locksley Hall it would not be. They declared unanimously for the history game. Rollo played his last card. In a whisper meant apparently for the Wrottesley boy, but carefully pitched to reach Agnes, he observed, "All right, old man. We'll go and finish those chocolates we left in the library." "I think it's only fair that the girls should take their turn in going out," exclaimed Agnes. "Nonsense," said the others. "There are too many of us." "Well, 4 of us can go. I'll be one of them." And Agnes darted off towards the library, followed by 3 less eager damsels. Rollo sank into a chair, winked and smiled ever so faintly at the Wrottesleys. From the library came the sound of moving furniture. Agnes was leaving nothing unturned in her search for the mythical chocolates. And then came a more blessed sound, wheels crunching wet gravel. "It's been a most enjoyable evening. Thank you, Mrs. Jallet," said Rollo to his hostess as he walked towards his waiting carriage.